I have been careful not to insult Mark Passio. I am attacking his ideas today because that is how I would want people to come at me. If I was putting out nonsense, I want people to attack my ideas. And if they're a little bit impolite in the process, that's part of the philosophy. We're adults here. We have thick skin. We put our ideas out there and people attack them. I am behaving as I would want someone to behave towards me with my philosophy. I'm not going to attack the person. I will not.
The condition of slavery has been imposed upon people, but it has never in history been legitimate, and it never will in history be legitimate. So there is no legitimacy to the concept of slavery, of the rightful rulership of another being through directly imposing your control through coercion. Doesn't exist. That's a big part of what natural law is about. We have to understand.
Okay, so
when
I
we're
agree
saying
with
this
them that
word,
slavery
this
is awful and terrible
meant.
and bad and wrong and racist and et cetera, et cetera. It's all true. However, I don't think he's established this. Throughout this whole entire thing, he has not established like why he believes the things that he believes in order to get to the position that slavery exists. Rather, it almost seems like he's working backwards. Slavery is bad, rape is bad, murder is wrong, all this other stuff. So let me try to find a way to justify it. And he's not actually providing any reasons for why he believes that. He's just saying that, like, according to this thing that I just threw together real quick, that I'm not going to substantiate any of the claims that are based in it. Therefore, slavery is wrong. Well, you need to do the legwork to prove all the things that you are leading up to this. Like, you can say we could say whatever we want about like Rothbard or Rand or all these other natural legislators, so to speak, of coming to the conclusion using their ethical formula to say slavery is bad, but at least they did the legwork. They tried to. Now, there's problems with a lot of them, right? I agree with the conclusion of it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that his steps to prove that slavery is wrong is incorrect or is correct.
There were no steps.
There was no steps. It was just like, here's some stuff. Here's what I believe. I don't have any evidence to back up any of this stuff. Therefore, slavery is bad. Okay, slavery is bad, but that doesn't mean that any of your steps before that were true.
Yeah, and you got me there. I was applauding the conclusion that I agreed with, but you're right. There were assertion, you're all sovereign. No evidence. None of you are slaves. Assertion, no evidence. Slavery is wrong. Assertion,
I agree.
No evidence. I mean, yeah, I agree, but teach us.
Prove it.
Why?
I just said agreeing is not proof. I can agree with something that doesn't have proof that someone is saying that they're not proving. He's supposed to be proving his ethical theory, and he's not doing it. He's just saying things towards the end I agree with. Not maybe at the very beginning where he's talking about all the woo stuff. It's not. I don't see where the problem is with that.
I agree slavery is wrong based on my own philosophy and my own moral framework that I've talked about at length on this channel. So I agree with his conclusions. And I said that in the beginning. Like we mostly agree with Mark Passio's conclusions. It's this video, this stream is about the philosophy of how to fundamentally build ourselves up to those conclusions, because we disagree there.
We know exactly why we agree with those conclusions. Evidently he doesn't. And he's the one making the video that's supposed to explain this stuff to us, and he's not. He's just making assertions.
That's a good point. Like if I was explaining my philosophy, first of all, it would take 30 minutes or less. Second, and I've done it before multiple times. And second of all, it would be from the fundamentals, from first principles up. What have I made? Like $80? Guys, please.
Something like that.
You think I'm needing $80? You think that's enough money to make me? You think $80? Hold on. Now that I've connected these dots, you think that I value $80 more than what I'm going through right now?
Streaming for 9 hours, 10 hours, whatever it's going to be.
Oh, wow.
Jesus Christ. I'm making more on my lunch break.
Oh, wow.
And here's what the biggest piece of knowledge that comprises natural law needs to be understood. There is a difference. It is a 100% completely polarized antithesis. These are diametric opposites that exist in nature.
Right versus
These
wrong exist in
concepts,
nature
right
is the
and
statement he
wrong,
just made.
do not exist as constructs within the human mind.
Right versus wrong do not
Anybody who
exist as
believes
constructs within the human mind. The most clear-cut, cogent line in the sand he's drawn in 8 hours of us streaming was the statement, right versus wrong are diametrically opposed and do not exist as constructs in the human mind. That is the clearest line in the sand he's drawn. That's something that we can actually engage and criticize. But we don't have to, because the burden of proof is on him making that statement. He should prove that.
Why would in English, in the English language, we have other words to mean the same concepts, but the word right means two things simultaneously. It means both correct and it means moral. There's a reason, because they mean the same thing.
Equivocation
Correct
happening in real time for you.
Correct meaning that it is in alignment with that which is true.
This is the core equivocation.
Means, literally, by definition, if it is true, then it is moral. The more you are following something that is false, that is not based in truth, the more you are going down the path of immorality, of wrongdoing. So we have to come to know what is true regarding right and wrong if we are going to be able to correctly, with wisdom, choose between these two modalities of behavior.
So I'm trying to wait till he's done, but also like there's a lot in here that we need to go over. Go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead. I'll wait.
Well, I was just going to put this on the board in relation to his graph about what constitutes right and what constitutes wrong, which is says who. This is the assertion that we're having, this assertion problem. He's asserting that this is what constitutes right, that it has to be correct, based in truth, moral, in harmony with natural law. Actions based in it do not result in harm to other sentient beings. Says who? Who says that that's what constitutes good? Who says that that moral judgment you're placing on those items is what is? Who says that those things are what constitute a wrong? Who? Reality doesn't do that. I can't whip out, as Christian would say. Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, no, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, go ahead. I'll come back in later.
I think I misheard what he said, but did he say that if you follow things that are true, then you're moral, but if you do things that are, or if you don't follow truth, you're following things that are wrong, and therefore it's wrongdoing? Is that what he said, or did I misinterpret what he said?
That would be the connotation. I don't know if he said that specifically, but associating incorrect and doing incorrect things with immorality would suggest that.
Okay. Yeah, that is a bit of equivocation if that's what he said.
So this is core to the his morality, his conception of morality, his moral philosophy is these definitions of right and wrong. And every time I'm ever engaged with by his followers, and I talk about right and wrong, it's just like they ramble off this line that they heard from Passio, and it's very much like what we're looking at here. And this really needs to be called out and addressed. He's making this up. This is an assertion. He's not proving this. There is no logical proof in play here. There is no argument in play here. He put it on the screen and said, this is what right is and this is what wrong is. That's not an argument. That's your opinion, man. Do you have that meme? Damn. So I want to belabor this because this is one of the few cogent moments in this entire live stream where we're going to have a concrete point at something and say, hey, this is a mistake. This is a rational mistake. You can't just assert right and wrong. That's not doing philosophy. That's not doing science of morality or of natural law. That's not science. That's just you saying, hey, this is right and wrong. Full stop. No argument, no discussion, no proof, no evidence. That's not acceptable. So if on nothing else, I think this justifies the title of this live stream. This is junk. This is his opinion. Go ahead, Christian.
What's really interesting to me is that he's had a lot of opportunity to build quite the fucking argument at this point. He's had a lot of opportunities to substantiate a lot of things with these points he's made, but he's walked himself into a begging the question almost. Like he set up all of these assertions and then he's like, what is moral? What is immoral? Well, it's the things that decide what's moral and immoral. You know, it's like a circular reasoning almost. It's kind of strange. And something that you were going to point at earlier, you know, we've gone over what the definition of natural law is a couple of times. And I guess we could do it again just for the sake of being rigorous. If I can find it in these notes, which are getting beefy.
Toward the top, yeah.
So his 2 parts. Yeah, natural, inherent, having basis in nature, law, an existing condition, which is binding and immutable. There is no morality particle that anyone has been able to find with all of their detectors and sensors that can justify what is moral and immoral in an objective way. This is my hot take, I guess. For something to be objectively moral, it has to be inherently moral. That means that whatever quality about it that makes that is the quality. It is the moral quality. And just trying to think about what that is difficult. You can kind of imagine an electron buzzing around. You know, it's a little vague, a little different, but try to imagine what a good particle would look like, or what the good waves would be, or what the immorality beam or state is. These are things that are abstractions of the human mind, and that's why we can't. It is so difficult to even wrap your head around what the idea of these things existing in reality would mean.
Yeah, to expand on that, you know, like if a murder happened, like a non-consensual killing happened, and you ran up with a good evil detector and it started blinking evil because it's detecting the evil particles floating in the air around this non-consensual killing that just happened, you can be like, oh, that's evil. The universe said so. Look at all these evil particles. And the same could be said, you know, a guy feeds the homeless and you run up with your detector and bleep, bleep, bleep. This was good. Look at all these good particles floating in the air around this homeless person that was just fed. That's what it means when you say that this stuff exists in reality as part of the fabric of reality, as part of nature. When you say this stuff is objective, that's what you're talking about. Right and wrong are judgments that you make on other people's interactions and actions. You apply the judgment on other people's actions and other people generally. And that's all this is. This is not objective, universal. What was the other words in the definition of natural law? Universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made. This is literally man-made. This is literally man-made. Eternal, immutable. This is just opinion. This is also a time to bring up Hume's law, also known as the Hume's Guillotine. Why is it called Hume's Guillotine? Because it murders philosophies before it even wakes up in the morning. And this philosophy is unfortunately one of those. I'm not happy about that. I was hoping he had cracked the code, but he hasn't. What is Hume's Guillotine? It is, you cannot get an ought from an is. You cannot take a statement about how the world is or what exists in reality and get an ought from it. You can't get a should from what is. A human has to apply that or come up with that based on that human's goals. That goals don't exist in reality. Reality doesn't have goals, and it can't hand you the judgments or the oughts or what you should do. It just is. A is A, as we were talking about earlier. It's not A is A, therefore you should. No. Reality doesn't do that. Only humans do that based on their goals. And this philosophy is jumping Hume's gap, the is-ought gap, the is-ought divide.
But that's also not to say that Hume's guillotine can't be bridged. I don't think it can, but it's possible that there might be someone far more brilliant that'll come down the line and actually be like, no, here's how we can bridge this gap. Mm-hmm. But until then, nobody has, and he's not even made an attempt to. It's just like, well, here's a bunch of is. This is bad. This is good. This is this is this. This is that. This is this. This is that. This is this. Therefore, you ought not murder, kill, rape, enslave other people. Whoa. Let's back the horse up here a little bit. We need to make that bridge. because there is a giant gap between all these things. Now, if you want to make the claim, if you want to make if thens, I think those are completely reasonable. And that's kind of how I approach like ethics. If you want to have a good life, then you ought to do this. If you want this, then you ought to do that. In the same way I would say, like, if you're hungry, then you should probably, have your wife cook you a sandwich. Like that sort of thing. If you want this, then you ought to do that. But if you're going to say that the state of nature is like you're hungry, then you ought to eat. Morally, you ought to eat. It's like, why I ought to eat just based on the fact that I am hungry. Maybe I want to starve. Maybe I'm anorexic. Maybe, whatever. Maybe I don't want to live anymore. I just want myself to starve to death.
Okay. There's one more really important thing I think to bring up with Hume's guillotine, and I do think this is a huge topic for literally anybody who's interested in philosophy. So I don't mind investing some time into it here. And that's that something that old Mr. Jesus over here pointed out was that what it's sort of indirectly pointed out is that Hume's guillotine kind of identifies the nested premises within all of these is-ought statements, right? So they all start with an ought in somewhere, which basically turns them into the kind of if-then statements. It's like, or some subjective preference in the beginning, which is like, we don't want to crash our cars. Speeding increases the likelihood of crashing your car, therefore we shouldn't speed. They obviously cut that beginning part out because it makes the whole thing subjective, right? They're using a piece of evidence to justify their subjective moral claim in the beginning. And then that gives you a subjective moral claim at the end. But by nesting it in the is, it makes it look like it is true. And so even if objective morality is real, and it's totally true, and their objective law is written into the universe, someone first has to say, we ought to follow objective morality. Objective morality is real, therefore do what objective morality says, right? That's the only way that's the only way it actually works, which makes the whole thing subjective and circular. But
okay, and I don't want to jump too far ahead because I know Passios is about to talk about this, but MTC Crazy says a right is an action that doesn't cause harm. This is the thing that just gets. I mean, I've heard that so many times for Passios supporters over the years when I talk about morality. A right is an action that doesn't cause harm. Well, you're judging that to be the case. There's nothing in nature that says something getting harmed is a wrong. And that's kind of the point here. And that's also why we're talking about Hume's law, Hume's guillotine.
If then.
So, right, again, it means both correct, which is based in truth, and moral, which means that the action, if taken, if acted upon, is in harmony with natural law. Actions based in it do not result in harm to other sentient beings. That's the definition of right. Now look at how simple that definition is. And think about it for a moment. We're talking about what is a right. Meaning, what do you have a right to do? And what you...
I'm going to stop you right there because we have redinged the equivocation fallacy. He's using the word right in two contexts. What is right for you to do and what is a right? These are two different concepts that just coincidentally share the same word. These are two different concepts, same spelling, same pronunciation. The equivocation fallacy is when a word or a term with two or more meanings is used in multiple senses in an argument. Exactly what's about to happen here.
Yeah, your computer can't run. Duh, it doesn't even have legs.
I think it is important to note that what is being implied is that rights are just like good and bad, something that are observable in nature, which is kind of crazy to think about because he even defined them as actions. So it's like when you see the action, you should see the rightness in it, or be able to see the absence of rightness if it's not a right. These are abstractions, which makes it so difficult to think about these things actually operating this way in reality. And he's asserting what is fact, or he's asserting a fact what is a baseless assertion. Again, there is nothing to substantiate this. It's just more of rights are this thing because I say so, and they're real because I say they're real. If any of these things were true, he could put up a slide of the rightness and be like, look, you see that? That's how you know this thing is a right. Or see that? That's how you know this thing is moral or immoral. But he can't. He can't. Because these things aren't objective. Because you can't just take a photo of them or put them under a scanner or anything like that. So, sorry. I know a little bit of ranting, but it's just kind of more of the same that we just identified, and it's just compounding on the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard not to repeat ourselves when we're going to be here for another several hours dealing with the same problems. So we're probably going to continue repeating ourselves until he stops making unfounded assertions.
So let's look at what a wrong is. We're going to deeply look into what a wrong is. We're going to focus on what wrongs are. Because in reality, to even start this, right, what have we based this definition on? Actions based in it do not result in harm, right? That's the negative of another definition. Well, it's the negative of this definition.
So I want to clarify something. So he's constructing a system of positive rights here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything, because that seems very it's very counter to most contemporary philosophies, and it just kind of buzzed right over my head that like he's developing the system as a positive rights system.
So he's making the claim that things that are wrong you ought not do. But he's also saying things that are right, you ought to do. Okay, why do I have a duty to do things?
And that goes back to if you have the knowledge, then you have the moral obligation to disseminate it. That's a positive obligation. That's a positive moral obligation. Yes, if he's going to assert that rights exist as part of nature, he has to show us proof. Where do they come from? How do they function? Like, he's saying they exist. So Pixar, it didn't happen. You got to show us.
Citation needed.
Citation needed, exactly.
You didn't have the right to do that. Immoral means in opposition to natural law. Because actions that are based in it result in harm to other sentient beings. That's the simple definition of a wrong.
Now he needs to provide an argument for why harm to other sentient beings is wrong. You can't just put that out there. You got to back it up. We need the argument.
Now we can go.
What
we
makes
can go
it
deeper
wrong?
Into the definition of what a wrong is,
Objectively.
and look at different types of wrongs, which is what I'm going to do.
I want to address Outlaw Barber's comment because I think it applies to what we're doing here. He says, everyone knows it's not okay to abuse a child. When you see a child being abused, we all know that is wrong. Am I not correct with this statement? So,
a lot of people who think that's okay.
Well, yeah, there are, a lot of child abusers.
But not even that. Just you go into other countries where child abuse is insane. Like we look at spanking and think that's brutal. There they straight up beat their kids, and it's just a normal part of everyday life. So not everyone knows.
But even if everyone thought that abuse was abuse, and we all agreed on what child abuse was, that still wouldn't be evidence of it being a moral judgment existing in reality. Like that would be it would be an ad populum fallacy. Just because everybody agrees doesn't mean you have a valid argument on your hands. And again, we're not making layman discussion here. We're making philosophical critiques. So you got to get this stuff right if you're going to say that you have the science of natural law. Like if you're going to use this language and say that you're putting Passio is putting us on this standard. He put us here. We didn't drag him here. Universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, eternal, immutable conditions. Like this is his language. We're holding him to his standards that he gave us. Go ahead, Jim.
So another thing that I think, and I think we probably live in a bubble, so we probably don't realize this a lot, but if you go out in the world and you start talking about like, oh yeah, like I just downloaded like every single album that I've ever listened to, and I downloaded all my movies. I never go to the movie theater, always, get the bootlegs, and I'd never pay for movies, never pay for streaming. There's a lot of people who get upset with that. Still a lot of people who get upset with that. And just because people think intuitively that that's stealing doesn't necessarily make it so. It's an ad populum.
So here's another way of looking at it. And I think we finally hit some meat in this discussion, especially with the audience. So I want to take a few minutes here, guys. So Dave10 says, but that doesn't make it okay. It is wrong. Even if everyone thought it was okay, it makes it wrong. The right thing to do is to not beat children. So if we were having a normal hangout by the fire, drink some whiskey and smoke a cigar friend discussion, yeah, sure, I'm good with that. That's not what we're doing here on the stream. This is a philosophical critique. You can't just make declarations like you just did and have that hold water in a philosophical discussion. You can't just say the right thing to do is to not beat children. Of course we agree with you. But can you prove that statement? Can you prove that statement? Show your work. That's what you do when you're trying to do philosophy. That's what we're trying to hold Passio to here to see if this is junk science or not.
Like I agree with most of his conclusions. Like, rape is wrong, stealing is wrong, slavery is wrong, beating your kids is wrong. I don't know about the veganism stuff, but I agree with like 99.99% of his conclusions. However, I don't agree with any of the math leading up to therefore. Everything before therefore, I completely disagree with 100%. And that's the problem. Is like if you're going to try to prove therefore, you need to show your work. You need to have that math there to say, hey, here's the foundation of what we're talking about. Here's the reasoning why it's wrong to do all these things. And it's important to do that so that way when you explain it to people who just aren't sycophants who are going to add on you most of the chat room, right? There's going to be people who are going to be like, wait, hold on a second. If you have something that's ironclad, which I don't think we've had yet, but there's something that's ironclad that proves that there's objective morality, that proves all of these things are immoral beyond reasonable doubt. I think that'll be a net benefit to society. And I'm always looking for it. And I'm always looking for it. Anytime some libertarian comes along and says, I have proof of objective, morality for the non-aggression principle, I'm all ears. I'm ready to hear it. I'm looking at it. I'm trying to pick through it with the fine-tooth comb, not because I don't want it to be true. It's because I want it to be true, and I want to make sure that I'm going to adhere to something that is true, so that when I relate it to other people, they're not going to be like, well, you haven't demonstrated any single one of your premises so far. Opinion discarded, which a lot of people will do when they read. Like people who are philosophically who understand these things are going to look at this and go, this is unsubstantiated claims.
And they would have walked away a long time before now.
Yeah.
Trust me. Like, I am committed to see this thing to the end, but if I wasn't, I would have already checked out. Like, we are way past the rational threshold for this. Go ahead.
I think something that could be useful to help maybe demonstrate this a little bit is Alukia said, I'm assuming sarcastically, need to prove that harming children is wrong. And the answer to that is yes, for the exact same reason someone would have to prove that you owning a gun is bad, or that you jaywalking across the street is bad, or that you downloading a movie off of the internet is bad, or that you breathing air is bad. Anytime, just, it's really easy to say like, well, these things are obvious because you agree with them, but find the thing that someone disagrees with you on, whatever it is, drug laws, policing, I don't know, IP, whatever it is. And then imagine that they're in your position that you're in now and just saying that those things are bad. You would say, well, why? How so? How come? You would want there to be some kind of an explanation.
Yeah, harming children is wrong. Okay, now go to a place where they disagree with you and tell them that. And when they say, well, who says? What are you going to say? How are you going to show your work? How are you going to prove to them it's wrong besides saying, hey, go watch this 8-hour presentation by Passio? Like, that's not an argument. Passio pointing to a board with a list of rights and wrongs, in his opinion, is not showing your philosophical work. We're not even out of bed yet, to use a common philosophical phrase. We haven't even started philosophy. This has just been assertions. The guy that super chatted, we hang, I feel terrible about his name, about what I'm doing to his name. Sorry, let me clarify. It says, are you just saying there needs to be more evidence on it because he says it's a science? Like in math, we need to first define what addition means, but can we answer where it can? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. If Mark Passio had said, hey guys, here's my opinion on what right and wrong is and what you shouldn't do and shouldn't do, we wouldn't even be talking right now. Everybody has opinions on what's right and wrong and what they should and shouldn't do. Fine. Have your opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. But when you call it science, when you say you're doing objective philosophy, that applies rigorous standards of reason and evidence to what you're saying. Just like if you called, like if you said, my opinion is that 2 and 3 make 7. Okay, well, that's your opinion. You're wrong, but okay, whatever. But if you said, no, I am abiding by the rules of math and reason and evidence, and I'm saying that 2 and 3 make 7. Okay, now you're objectively wrong, and we have a problem because you're summoning in standards that you're not meeting. So yeah, that's basically exactly what I think I'm saying, at least, if not us.
It's not an argument. This is like the whole entire video we've been listening to, just no arguments, not just bad arguments, because there's not bad arguments being made. Well, there's been a couple, but for the most part, all of it's just like, this is true. Why is it true? It's just true. Well, this is true. What do you mean? How do we know it's true? Well, it's just true because I said so. You should just know that it's true. On and on and on and on. And then it's like, therefore this. Like, whoa. We haven't even established even the first premise. Not even the first one.
Not even one. Like every set of, I think I can say this as a blanket statement thus far. Every single sentence he said so far could have been followed by, because I said so.
Yeah.
That's not philosophy. That's not science. Full stop.
Dave 10 had a comment. There isn't a philosophy that meets this standard then, right? And you are absolutely correct. Here's my, what does Passios say all the time? He says, this is the egos or whatever, right? I have a big problem with people trying to solve philosophy because I legitimately don't believe it's not possible, but maybe someday someone way smarter than us. Right now, there is no philosophy ever constructed that meets the standard that Passios is trying to put on himself. And there have been thousands of people who have tried. There are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of individual books all trying to do the exact same thing as him with a different flavor. And no one has been able to do it. And for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about and many more. But just the things that we've talked about alone have been damning to 99% of them for the exact same reasons.
So I agree in terms of ethics. I don't know about other realms of philosophy. There's some pretty good, metaphysics and stuff like that, but epistemology,
sure.
But ethics, ethics is the one that I really despise because everybody thinks they have the answer because reasons, and it's like, well, because reasons is not an argument.
Yeah, I think you're very right. I think we can get close on some of these things, but ethics specifically, yeah.
Mark's teaching is true. We have been indoctrinated into believing that morality is subjective. Citation needed. Which is the entire problem, dude. You guys aren't even logically consistent. We're not making arguments. We're responding to Passios' presentation. You haven't heard our philosophies.
Let's just say that there's like two people who are arguing about ethics, right? And the two people that are arguing is one person thinks that it's immoral for you not to eat excrement every day. And then there's another person that says, no, that's not immoral. What is immoral is not drinking urine every day. And so the person who's claiming that, that you should drink urine every day is going after the arguments being made by the person who says you should eat excrement every day. Now, he can make a logical case of why eating excrement is not moral or is not a moral act, or not eating it is immoral. He can make a sound case. It does his dumb philosophy about drinking pee has no bearing on his arguments against the other way. If we're just talking about his specific ideology that you should eat excrement every day, it doesn't have any bearing on it. And it's something that I used to deal with, like the Zeitgeist movement all the time, is I would critique their arguments, and I would make a conscious effort to never, ever mention what my solution is to all the world's problems, my political goals, anytime I argue with these people, because it's always a distraction. It's like, well, what do you believe? What is your cure? Well, that's wrong because this. It's like, no. We're not going to talk about that. Maybe when I make my video about what my political philosophy is, we can talk about that. We can have that discussion. But right now, the topic is yours. And just because my worldview and my ethical system or my, eating or drinking excrement morality is wrong or right has no bearing on whether or not your prescription is incorrect. So we're talking about Mark Passio. We're focusing on Mark Passio. And we could say like Passio, whatever. I always mess up his name. I'm sorry. We could talk about him all day, but my egoism has no bearing on my criticism of that. I'm not coming at this as an egoist, he is wrong because X. I'm saying he hasn't demonstrated anything to prove his point whatsoever. Sure, we could agree on that, but that has no relationship whatsoever to whether or not what he's saying is actually true.
We don't even have to have an opinion or a position. We don't even have to have a philosophy. We're not involved here. We're considering it. And if we don't have one, and if we don't have an alternative to Marx's philosophy, that doesn't mean Marx is right. That's I think what Jim is saying. Like, even if we've got nothing, even if we have no ideas of our own, that doesn't make his right. That's what we're working through today, is his right.
Evolution is wrong, or creationism is true because evolution is wrong. Does not follow.
Says, Weehang says, I think you can prove morality is objective by proving that it is not subjective. Can we prove rights are objective because as voluntarists, we know there are principles that there are regardless of what society thinks? Again, show your work. Where do these principles come from? If somebody said, prove it to you, how would you prove that we have these principles that are there regardless of what society thinks? That's what the work of doing philosophy is. And that's what that's what we're doing on this channel, specifically Disenthrall, is about this nerdy philosophy stuff a lot of the time. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to improve ourselves here.
And to bring it back one more time. So like Democrats all the time will talk about how it's immoral for people to go out and buy guns or carry guns around and stuff like that. When you press them on it, it's just, well, because it just seems bad. This is the same level of argumentation that I get from Democrats, and it's the same arguments that I get from Republicans when they start talking about something like why pornography is wrong. A lot of the time they'll give you a completely incoherent thing like, oh, it's just degenerate. It's like, well, that's not an argument. That's just saying something is degenerate. That doesn't prove anything. You're just expressing your opinion. And then it's supposed to turn into objective morality by the end of it. It does not follow. It does not follow. It doesn't. If we're going to have a higher standard for them than we have for us, then there's something fundamentally wrong with the way you're thinking. You have to hold everybody up to the same standard, including yourself.
Alakia says they want to be free from humans called government, but think rights are subjective. You don't know what we think rights are. We haven't talked about our positions today. You don't know. We're not. It's not about us today. This is important for you to understand. Like, we don't have to be right ourselves to know if Passio is right or wrong. I think I already made that point, so I won't do it again. Outlaw Barber says
he's not doing it.
Abusing children is wrong because there is stacks of data that show that children that are abused are way more likely to self-harm and use harm on others as adults. Is data right or wrong? The judgment,
Hume's law.
Hume's law, exactly. The judgment of whether or not children self-harming is bad is your opinion. Is not in nature. That judgment is not in nature. It's not. If you say it is, that is the burden of proof is on you. You have to prove that there's something about reality that says that that's true. That's the point. That's Hume's law. That's Hume's guillotine.
I just saw Aaron Butler's latest comment. You don't get to say that morality is subjective and agree that slavery is wrong. I don't think any of us have made the claim in this video that slavery is wrong. We could all be pro-slavery for all you know. It has literally no bearing on, I'll say it since everybody else has said it, on Passios' claims. It has no bearing on their validity, no bearing on their soundness, no bearing on their cogency. Whatever baggage you are bringing into the conversation to project onto us is irrelevant to what we're trying to do here. Now, I want to make sure that it's clear. I don't think any of us agree or disagree with the statement that slavery is wrong. I'll go ahead and bite that bullet now. But you can't just assert these things and say like, oh, look at this, morality is subjective and thinks that slavery is wrong. Look at these nerds. That's not how any of this works. Like, philosophy is a system. It's known as the first science, right? That's the beautiful part about it. There are ways to engage with topics and ideas that produce that take falsifiable claims and produce accurate and repeatable results. And that's what we're doing here. That's all we're doing. It's not anything more than that. We're not over here talking about how horrible of a person Passio is. We're not over here talking about how dumb his prescriptions on reality are. We're saying X to Y doesn't make sense. Or just actually, since there hasn't been any X, therefore Y, we're just saying X doesn't make sense. Or he's just saying Y. So it's not even that deep, bro. Like, we're level 1. This is level 1 right now.
And it's also not disrespectful. Like, if I was going around telling people 2 and 3 make 7, and you said, no, Patrick, we got to talk. Hold on, Patrick, come here. 2 plus 3 equals 5, bro. Like, you would be helping me. You would be paying me the respect of your attention to correct my misperceptions. That's what we're doing here. This is not meant to... No one's digging up Passio. I bet he's cool. I bet he's a nice guy. In fact, I know people that know that he's a nice guy. This has nothing to do with him personally.
I'm sure he's a great guy. I'm pretty sure he'd be cool to hang out with and have a whiskey with.
Hell yeah. Mentally Illest Radio says the condition of theft created by doing certain actions is objectively wrong because that condition violates ownership and creates the incentive to defend that ownership. The violation of ownership is how we know what causes harm. What says that violating ownership is bad? Show your work. This is philosophy, not a fireside chat with whiskey. Well, I mean, I guess everybody's got whiskey.
I'm having whiskey.
Yeah. This is philosophy. You have to show your work. You cannot just make assertions like that. That is an assertion. You got to show your work. That's what's hard. The philosophy is hard. It is really hard. People think it's easy. It's not.
Especially when you've been doing it for 8 hours.
Yeah. Okay. One more time. Aaron Butler. Harm equals wrong, he says. Come on, guys. It's not hard. Says who? Show your work. Prove that it's wrong. Tell me right now. Make your next comment. Don't comment another word on my channel until your comment says the proof of why harming something or someone is wrong. Objectively wrong. Why? Prove it. Show your work.
Challenged it and tried to say lying. I say, okay, that's really taking the truth from somebody, thieving truth. And whether you want to look at it as you're simply dissuading them from looking at the truth too,
no,
or not offering correct information, still you're taking away
truth is not property.
That was the stupidest thing you interpreted there.
that was really bad. That was not good.
Information. So it is a form of theft.
No.
Some form of property. Now look at that word. Property. Proper. Meaning right. Is always being stolen when a wrongdoing is committed. All rights are property.
Proper right. But you can fit so many assertions in this bitch. What does that mean? So this was, I guess, in response to my challenge to Alakia on showing his work on why it was wrong, why murder was wrong. He says, proof murder is wrong because the right to take another life does not exist. Okay, so what you just did is you made an argument that had a premise. The right to take a life does not exist. Was a premise in your argument that you didn't show your work for. So again, please show your work. What is this right to life? What is this right to not be murdered? Where does it come from? You got to show your work, man. You have to back your statements up, your premises up. Mentally Illest Radio says pain hurts. There's the proof. Who says pain is wrong? You got to show your work.
To give birth.
Proof murder. Some people like pain. Mentally Illest Radio says every person doesn't like to be. Mentally Illest Radio said every person doesn't like to be thefted. That's proof that there's a constant to everyone's experience. It says something about the self. The self hates theft. That's an ad populum fallacy. Just because everybody thinks something is bad doesn't mean that it's bad. You have to actually show something in nature if you're going to try and claim that it's objectively bad. Also, there are people that don't mind being thefted. What was that actor's name in California recently that talked about his car getting broken into and he wasn't that worried about it? What was his name? Jim, did you hear
Seth
this on
Rogen.
Twitter?
Seth Rogen.
Seth Rogen. He's like, yeah, whoever broke into my car and took stuff, probably needed it more than I didn't want it stolen from me. So, whatever. So again,
Yeah, some people are like want their car stolen because then they're like, oh, sweet, now I can get that insurance payment.
Yeah,
get a better car.
But even if every person doesn't like it, doesn't mean that it's not. It's still not an argument. Outlaw Barber says, I think because I have consumed so many magic mushrooms in my life that I still believe morality is objective because the force of nature, while tripping, show this to me. I can never prove it, though. So...
Dude, we know.
No, so it's totally possible that you had some legit experience that actually provided you evidence that you do not have the capacity to share with me that proved that somehow this objective morality existed in nature. That is totally possible. I cannot disprove that. And as you know, that is not sufficient evidence for me, and you can't provide me sufficient evidence of your experience. So that doesn't do anybody else that didn't have that experience any good.